two-sentence horror stories.
Drip, drip, drip. It's been 15 minutes and I'm beginning to think my interrogator didn't fake his heart attack. As the child strayed ever farther from her distracted parents, I prepared to jump from the shadows and take her. As her foot inched over the edge of the pool, I drew my scythe. The kid had never seen a cruise ship in her entire life, and so she wanted to take a closer look. The Kraken pulled the cruise ship down so her kid could check it out thoroughly.
"It's the trees," the climatologist wheezed. "They're not producing oxygen anymore. But that's not the worst part. They're doing it on purpose." The newborn looked at me in the eyes and said, "Only one of us will leave this room alive." You know how this goes. The first sentence builds up tension for something scary. Give me enough time to pick the lock on your back door.
"I'm gonna break your fingers if you don't start talking." It wasn't until he pulled out the liquid nitrogen that I realized he wasn't just talking about the bones. He was pleased by how well the erectile dysfunction pills he got off the internet worked. He was less pleased 4 hours later when his erection still hadn't gone down, but his diabetic girlfriend had a spare syringe and an idea. "Felix is staring at that wall again. What a silly cat," my husband said. I didn't think Felix was silly, because I am certain he knows what is hidden behind that wall. My twin and I always fought over everything, for the last piece of pizza, who got to brush their teeth first, who got their hair brushed by Mom. She always got everything in her favor, even now, as we headed to the operating room, where she would have the life of having a body without a conjoined twin attached to her neck. The girl who had just moved into the house across the street kindly offered to babysit my kids. After my wife and I returned home from our date night to find the kids missing, the lady across the street told us that she didn't have a daughter. When the machines took over, we thought it would be like Terminator with hunter bots shooting people in the streets, nukes, etc. With access to our online history, they could just turn us on each other. "You really took a wrong turn, didn't you?" my wife said from the back seat of the car as I drove through the woods. "Jesus!" I screamed as I drove off the road, for I had buried her 10 minutes ago. As a male doctor, I had always assumed the sobbing women were just being overdramatic as I put the IUDs in, and I told them the pain was worth it to not get pregnant. Now, as I scream and a group of women holding me down force the T-shaped piece of plastic up my urethra, I'm realizing I should have given them actual painkillers during their procedures. "The neural implant will eliminate Lily's seizures," smiled the neurologist. Seeing us exchange glances, he added, "If cost is a concern, the ad-supported base model is very affordable." "Daddy, who's that skinny-looking man in the background?" asked my daughter as we watched the Artemis 3 moon landing live. I thought she was just being silly until news came out that hundreds of thousands of children had also seen it during the stream. "She's just a dog. Ignore her barking and she'll quieten down." I stared at my owner, then walked away. Walking on all fours was becoming easier and my bark was sounding more real. The doctor told me I had been legally dead for 1 minute and 15 seconds. 75 seconds was all it took for me to know no man, woman, or child deserves the horrors of what comes next. I angrily shouted at the doctor, "Just because you can't hear the voices doesn't mean you can say categorically that they aren't real." The doctor calmly replied, "And just because I am one of those voices doesn't mean I automatically have to agree with you." The cops wouldn't do anything about my stalker ex-boyfriend, even after he broke into my house to steal my toothbrush, so I was relieved when he just abruptly moved on and left me in peace. It's been years now, but my heart almost stopped when I ran into him in town today, walking hand in hand with a little girl who looks just like I did as a child. My girlfriend was a revolutionary scientist, and when she asked me to participate in one of her experiments, I accepted on the spot. I no longer know where my body ends or where the machine begins. Before leaving the room, my daughter waved to everyone and everyone waved back. No matter the channel or the show, whenever my daughter waves at the TV, everyone on screen waves back with a smile. "The baby's happy and healthy, ma'am," the doctor said. "Nothing to worry about." I didn't know how to tell her I was born a male, and the thing inside me couldn't possibly be human. A young woman arrived at the ER, agonized by a large ice pick lodged in her left eye. After learning of her history of migraines, the doctor wrote her a prescription for strong painkillers and sent her on her way. As we pulled into the McDonald's drive-thru, My friend clutched his bleeding wound and asked what we were doing here. Sorry, man, but I couldn't afford the ad-free self-driving, so the car is going to be stopping at a few stores and restaurants before we get to the hospital. I was pissed that my daughter had her phone set to D&D again, 2 hours past curfew, so I used the location tracker to find her myself. Now I'm standing in an empty alley next to the dumpster where the location tracker has pinged her phone, and I'm honestly too terrified to open the lid and look inside. I informed the parents that we couldn't find their daughter after the earthquake. It's easier than accepting that it was impossible to rescue her, even though we heard her buried calls for help. What I was about to do would be a violation of the trust my patient put in me, as well as the law. But knowing she was sound asleep, so innocent and vulnerable, I just couldn't stop myself. I'm sorry to wake you, I said to the sleepy woman on the other end of the phone, but your husband is a patient of mine, and you need to get out of the house before he gets home. Now that we've fully transitioned to self-driving cars, I had assumed traffic jams would be a thing of the past, but it's like a parking lot on the highway, and I can't unlock the open lane unless I upgrade to premium. If you need some extra D6, feel free to grab a few dice from one of the board games on the shelf in the other room, the DM advised the D&D group. When the elephants came bulldozing through the living room, realization and dread struck his face when he realized which game I borrowed my set of dice from. After starting Ambulatrin, Zoe's nightmares of twisted metal and shattered glass began fading, and she could even drive again. Humming a lullaby, Zoe gently fastened the straps on her daughter's empty car seat. I remember the day the immortality elixir was invented. They practically gave it away. Now that I sit here on the street, my body is filled with agony. At age 187, I pray that one day I will have enough money to buy my death. Finally, I can obtain retribution for my son's death. 30 years ago, my son was killed accidentally by another kid, and yesterday, that kid became a father. As Jeremy gave his high school graduation speech, he used his hand to shield the sun from his eyes. When he noticed it was actually the glint from a rifle scope, his jaw dropped, along with the rest of his body. "Told you there is nothing in there," my son said, as I was shining the flashlight into the dark, empty space. I kept looking into the cut on my son's skin with my flashlight, but could only see empty space behind the skin. My parents rarely talk about my brother who died when I was a baby. Walking through the halls, I heard my mother whisper to my dad, "He's getting too big for us to keep him down there, honey." After experiencing the same day hundreds of times, I killed someone just to see what it felt like. I woke up at the dawn of next day to the sound of police breaking down my door. Temperatures today are expected to reach a high of 35 degrees Celsius, so remember to use that sunscreen, the radio bulletin crackled. The sweating scientist sighed as he turned off the radio, fondly remembering a time when Antarctica had snow. The surgeons told me I may experience some phantom sensations in my missing limb, a side effect of my brain reckoning what should be there with what really is. I've read and reread the pamphlet they gave me, but nowhere on the list of symptoms does it say why I feel a cold, wet hand holding mine. "Did I stop 9/11?" the time traveler asked when he returned. His colleague raised an eyebrow and replied, "Which 9/11th did you try to stop again?" I finished writing the name on the magical scroll, which would teleport me to any individual I named. As the flames began scorching the flesh from my bones, I realized I had misspelled Santa. My friend has been feeding her cat a vegan diet for a few months now. This morning, she was found with her jugular ripped out of her throat and the cat nowhere to be seen. My wife wept as the doctor told her our daughter wouldn't survive past birth and should be aborted. Buying his cooperation hadn't been cheap, but my firstborn will be a son, no matter what. My friend asked to borrow something from my closet that her evangelical parents won't let her have. I have no problem with the request, but it's hella awkward trying to fit a wire hanger into my school backpack. I've been taking care of Miss Ellie for years in the nursing home. She has always been slow, but very independent. Got worried about her being in the bathroom by herself for so long that I popped the lock and caught her struggling with the zipper on her wrinkly old skin suit. I've been able to see a tornado out of my window for the last 10 minutes. I'm not worried though. It hasn't looked like it's moving for a while. My parents lied when they said it would be fun to have a baby brother, so I'm sending him back where he came from. I am not sure what temperature they had him at originally, But Mom usually bakes buns at 425, and he stopped crying pretty quick, so that must have worked. I was grateful when my captor offered me food after 3 days of torture. I've never heard of an anguish pair before, but it must be better than starving. She fell in love with me when I trusted her enough to tell her that I have a mental health condition where I take everything literally. Tears started to slide down my face when she asked me to come upstairs and rearrange her guts. Poof! The last person who remembered you has passed, and you are truly gone. I know the church failed your mother, but you must ask yourself if this is how she would want you to be remembered, pleaded the priest. Considering her last words to me were, "Give 'em hell," I retorted, while the first wave of demons poured through the portal I had just opened.